Patty Prewitt was convicted of murdering her husband. Patty spent 38 and a half years for a crime she has always maintained she did not commit. Finally, a free woman. You literally had 2 hours warning before you walked out that prison door?
I walked out in prison clothes.
We were told it was burned in a fire, it was lost. They actually found it.
They did a testing for gunshot residue.
Her hands were clean.
Dr. Phil, I have children. I could never give up.
This is a personal note. This is a night that I have been anticipating for years. Patty Prewitt, a woman who has become a symbol of resilience and hope, is finally sitting in her own home, not behind prison bars, but as a free woman. Patty spent 38 and a half years behind bars for a crime she has always maintained she did not commit, the crime of murdering her husband, Bill. Just weeks ago, on December 20th, 2024, Missouri Governor Mike Parson granted her clemency, bringing her home after nearly 4 decades of separation from her family. I have followed her incredible story for years. Take a look.
It was like 2:30 in the morning. Someone entered our home, cut the phone lines, cut the power, and murdered my dad. He was shot in bed with his own gun. My mom remembers being woken up by the man pulling her out of the bed by her hair. The police found the gun in one of our ponds. They looked at my mother as being the only suspect from the very beginning. 5 to 7 years before my father was killed, my mother had had multiple affairs. The police used mom's affairs against her during her trial for murder. My mother was portrayed as a loose woman with loose morals. She was found guilty of capital murder in the 1st degree, and then they sentenced her to life with no parole for 50 years. I can't even describe how hard it is to have my mom in prison all of our lives. She's missed everything. She's missed every one of our weddings, every one of her grandchildren. She has a great-grandchild now. It's just hard.
Your father is dead, so the only person to speak about it is your mother.
Yes.
And she, of course, says, and has always said, she didn't do it. The theory was she did it, she pulled the trigger.
Yes.
Did they test your mother for gunshot residue?
They did, and she passed. The night that Dad was murdered, my sister saw a flashlight under the basement door. Somebody else was in the basement of the house with that flashlight. My sister did tell the police that when they interrogated all of us, no one seemed to believe any of us, and Mom was convicted.
Patty has maintained her innocence. She is joining us on the phone from the Women's Eastern Reception Diagnostic and Correctional Center in Missouri. So the intruder that you say was there grabbed you by the hair, dragged you out of your bed, and what happened then?
This man, this stranger, pulled off my bottoms and he raped me.
Were you aware that your husband had been shot at that point?
No, not at all.
There were phone cords that were cut, the lights that were shut off at the breaker. They didn't test that to see if there were fingerprints there. You had knife marks on your neck, where a knife was held to your neck while you were being assaulted. The request for DNA to prove your innocence was denied. The jury never heard the testimony from your neighbor concerning significant amounts of hair next to the bed. The day of the murder, they swabbed your hand and got negative results. There was no gunshot residue, and 36 years later, there you sit.
That's the story of my life. And then I count you, Dr. Phil McGraw, as an extreme blessing right now, a gift from God.
Now, at 75 years old, Patty isn't just a survivor. She is a beacon of strength who earned multiple academic degrees, became a published writer, and never lost hope. A mother of 5, grandmother of 13, and great-grandmother, Patty has a story that will inspire millions. And tonight, she's going to tell it. not from behind prison walls, but as a free woman. Patty, it is so good to talk to you and talk to you from home and not prison.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much.
Tell me how you're feeling. Tell me how you're doing.
I couldn't be doing better. It is wonderful out here. People keep asking me if I'm overwhelmed. Going to prison is overwhelming. Coming home to loved ones is perfect. It's perfect.
Well, that's just so great to hear. How long before you were released did you know you were going to be released, and how did it feel when you found out?
My daughter was visiting me on a regular visit, and I was released like 2 hours after that visit. It's incredible. I walked out in the parking lot to my daughter's truck, and we drove home. Half my kids were waiting at the house when we got there. It was no warning whatsoever. It was a miracle, a miracle.
Well, that's just so amazing to hear. So you literally had 2 hours warning before you walked out that prison door?
Yeah, exactly. I walked out in prison clothes. I didn't even have my property. That was on behalf of the warden of the prison. She pushed that through. She made it work. And God bless her too.
40 years in and a 2-hour warning to get out. It's a good thing they didn't think you were escaping since you were in prison. I'm glad the word got around.
Yeah, it was kind of scary. I thought, I'm walking through the prison parking lot in my prison clothes, and it was kind of scary to me. But we just kept walking.
Yeah, I don't know how you kept from breaking out into a run. Listen, I also wanted to surprise you, Patty, with someone that you know very well. Our own News on Merritt Street anchor and former Los Angeles prosecutor, Lonnie Coombs. Lonnie, say hello.
Oh my goodness, Patty, I am so thrilled for you. You look amazing. How are you doing?
Wonderfully, wonderfully. It's so good to see you, Lonnie.
It's great to see you. I haven't seen you for 7 years. The last time I saw you, you were still in prison. We talked there. And to believe that this day finally came and here you are in your home, I'm just so happy for you and for your family. I'm just thrilled for you.
Thank you so much. It is beyond wonderful.
Well, so Patty, tell us, what was it like to spend your first night at home in a real bed surrounded by the people that love you and that you love so much?
It was just wonderful. What's funny, though, the bed was way too soft. And I slept with my oldest daughter, and she and I didn't sleep. We just kept cuddling and talking, but the bed was too soft. I said, I'm feeling like rolling out on the carpet and sleeping because prison beds are hard as rocks. And I'm getting used to soft now. But at first it was really hard.
What's been the most challenging thing to adjust to after all of those years? I've talked to a lot of prisoners that have gotten out, gotten off death row, all different kinds of circumstances. What's been the most challenging adjustment?
You're gonna really think I'm stupid. Seat belts. They didn't have seat belts when I was free. They had lap belts, but we pushed them between the seats. We didn't use seat belts. And that's the first thing. I get in the truck with Jane when we leave, and she says, you have to put on your seat belt. And I go, well, where is it? And that is the stupidest thing. Now, to get out, I've been training to get out all my life. But nobody told me about seat belts.
Well, listen, who can question it? You just have to experience. All right, we're going to take a quick break. And coming up, Lonnie says she dug up some new evidence to help Patty, and she's going to tell us about that when we come back. Money lessons can be hard-earned, especially when it comes to making the most of finances. Keeping all savings in one place may seem smart, but it doesn't allow money to grow effectively. Well, today's episode sponsor, Acorns, is here to help. Acorns is a financial wellness app that makes it easy to start saving and investing for your future. You don't need to be an expert. Acorns will recommend a diversified portfolio that matches you and your money goals. You don't need to be rich. Acorns lets you get started with the spare money you've got right now, even if all you've got is spare change. It only takes 5 minutes to set up an account. So take that first small, simple step to getting your money back on track. Sign up now and join the over 13 million all-time customers who have already saved and invested over $22 billion with Acorns. Head to acorns.com/Dr. Phil or download the Acorns app to get started right now.
Paid non-client endorsement. Compensation provides incentive to positively promote Acorns. Tier 1 compensation provided. Investing involves risk. Acorns Advisors, LLC, an SEC-registered investment advisor. View important disclosures at acorns.com/Dr. Phil.
Well, we're back. I'm here with Lonnie Coombs, one of our news anchors here at Merit TV, and we're talking to Patty Prewitt, who we both know, who we've both worked with separately and together, actually. Patty is the longest-serving female inmate in Missouri prison history, if I'm correct. Mm-hmm. Lonnie, is that right?
Mm-hmm, that's right.
And Patty was convicted of murdering her husband and has served 38 and a half years, almost 40 years. I think wrongfully convicted, frankly. I don't think she ever had a fair trial. I think it was very biased. But she has now received clemency and is at home with her family. And Patty, we are so excited about that. I know you are. And you've had to make some adjustments. But what's it been like to spend time with your family and to get to just relax, kick back, not be in a hurry, and bond with them again?
In prison, you get one brief hug at the beginning of a prison and one brief hug, and I'm talking brief, like 1 second. We're hugging fools now. We're absolutely hugging all the time. I can't get enough hugs from my grandkids, my kids. I would hug people in the grocery store, but I try to refrain. I'm a hugging fool.
I'll bet so. Lottie, you had a million questions for Patty.
Yeah. I am sure, Patty, with that physical contact, it's supposed to be so wonderful of all those years of having that denied, right? I also think of all the things that have changed since you went into prison. I mean, Ronald Reagan was president when you went into prison. I think about that, and now there's so many changes, like technology has changed, the internet has changed. Have you even tried to get onto a computer and look at the internet or anything like that?
I'm all over it. All over it. The Miracle of Innocence Project bought me this smartphone, and first I thought it was smarter than me, but I've got a handle on it now. and when I was in prison, I was enrolled in Washington University, and they gave us laptops. So I have a laptop. I'm all about technology.
That's so
not
great.
Not laptop.
I understand you love Alexa.
Well, Alexa and I had a problem at first because I was calling him Siri and he didn't respond. So once I got his name right, I'll be fine.
All right. Well, that's great. And we think about all the things that you've missed. It was Ronald Reagan's second term. Live Aid concerts have been held in Britain and Philadelphia. The Space Shuttle Challenger disaster happened. The internet has become just ubiquitous. Social media platforms didn't exist. There was no Instagram, right. There was no TikTok or any of that. Texting and Zoom, Googling is a verb. 9/11 took place, and you've had grandkids. You've missed 233 birthdays. That's just heartbreaking. You've got 2 great grandkids' birthdays. All of these things have happened since you've been in.
Yeah, that's true. But I'm telling you, my grandkids and I are all about FaceTime. We're FaceTiming all the time.
Well, that's so great. And while you were there, you really did a lot on the educational front. What all did you get done while you were there?
When I first came to prison, I went straight to classes. But then thanks to Reagan, in 94, we lost Pell Grants for prisoners. But in 95, they brought in a computer programming thing, and I became a computer programmer for the Department of Corrections on an IBM AS400. And I did that for 20 years. I just loved it. And then I got my certificate to be a group exercise instructor and a personal fitness trainer. Whatever they've got offered, if I'm eligible, I took it.
Well, I understand you're just 6 credits from having a humanities degree. Is that right?
Yeah, I know. I can't wait. I can't wait.
That's just amazing. So you're not supposed to ask a lady how old they are, but how old are you now?
I'm 75 and a half.
All right, so you're counting it close. So what goals have you set for yourself now that you're out?
I want to be an advocate for like Innocence Projects. Here at UMKC, they've got the Midwest Innocence Project, and advocate for Miracle of Innocence, advocate for Washington University's prison education program, and advocate for prison performing arts group out of St. Louis. All these things are wonderful groups. They help prisoners. People think prisoners are awful. Turns out there's so many good women in prison, and they deserve a break. They deserve an education. And I will beat the drum for all these organizations.
That's something that she really distinguished herself. When you worked with her before, you found out she's really been a powerful force inside prison.
A shining example and really a mentor to so many women that would come through. You know, they would come through and then they would leave. And Patty knew she was going to stay there for years beyond that, but she was so welcoming to them and so giving to them and helping them to adjust and see that they had value and helping them to go back out. And Patty, I remember that. I remember talking to you and saying, you know, how do you deal with knowing that you're going to be in prison for so long? And you said, I don't focus on the lifetime. I focus on one day, each day at a time. And every day you were just filling it with things to improve yourself and to help other women. And I think that that's just shows your resilience and also that you made such a huge impact while you were there.
And it's not hard. All you have to do is listen to people. You know, just love them. Everybody needs love.
It can be hard if you let it, and you certainly didn't. And when we come back, we'll hear from Patty's daughter, who was 16 years old when her mother was incarcerated for her father's murder. I'm really interested in what her experience has been since her mother walked out that prison door with 2 hours' notice. We'll talk to her next. When Patty Prewitt was incarcerated, Jane, her daughter, was only 16 years old. She stepped into a mother role for her younger siblings and an advocate for Patty's freedom. And she's joining us virtually. Jane, it's so good to talk to you.
Hi.
I'm really curious how you feel having your mother home and all of your work, all of your hopes, all of your dreams coming true with having her home.
It's been amazing, of course. I was at the visiting room with her when we received word. They just kind of had us exit the visiting room together, and then we got to hang out in a conference room for a couple hours. And then while they did all the paperwork and got everything sorted out, and then we couldn't believe it that we were getting to walk out together, and it's been great. We've had a few weeks of just as much as we want of each other, which is great.
That is great. And you really worked to help your mother fight for her innocence. What all did you do?
I tried early on before internet and everything. We just had paper petitions. So my mom's sister, my Aunt Mary, and I would try to get as many signatures as we could to get whatever governor was in office to hear us. And then as time went on with the internet, it was much easier through social media and websites that take care of that. But I also joined lots of organizations over the years, from the Midwest Innocence Project to the National Innocence Project, Missouri Cure, Missouri Prison Reform, and, Families Against Mandatory Minimums. And I took classes online mostly and attended events and tried to network and meet anybody that I felt could help our cause. And I tried to do whatever Mom's attorney, when Brian Reichart came onto the case 14 years ago, from that point on, he was someone that could give me assignments or help me know what he would need help with.
Why did you maintain your belief so deeply in your mother's innocence?
I always believed her, and I always believed my younger sisters that they saw a flashlight under the door I also saw Mom's bruised body. I saw horrible bruises from her hip bones to her knees. She was definitely hurt that night and had knife marks on her neck. And then we were also harassed at the house after Dad was gone. We had some scary things in our lives, and it all was part of, what we were going through together.
Well, Lonnie, you did a really deep dive on this case. And what evidence did you find that was said to be lost?
Yeah, Dr. Phil, we came onto this case about 7 years ago. And the Innocence Project recommended it as a case that was really important and should be looked at as a wrongful conviction case. And we did a lot of different things to try and determine really, innocence or guilt, how we could prove that. And it got to the point where we could not come up with anything definitive. And we realized really Patty needed something new, right? A new piece of evidence to try and take to court and get a new trial, if anything. And so we asked, what about DNA testing? Now we could be doing DNA testing on this stuff. And the attorney, Brian, said, oh no, we were told all of the physical evidence was destroyed. Not just us told that, but for decades, Patty's attorneys have been told all of the physical evidence was destroyed. And I remember one night, late night, in the hotel room with the showrunner of our docuseries saying, what can we do? And I said, you know what? We can't give up. I've heard this over and over again. Evidence was destroyed. It was burned in a fire. It was lost. Don't believe that. Be relentless and try and find it. And so our producers did for weeks and weeks and weeks. And finally, they actually found it. They got somebody in one of the evidence lockers, one supervisor who went in and came up with bags and bags of evidence. It was shocking to us. It was shocking to the attorneys. It was shocking to everyone involved. And in that evidence, Dr. Phil, Patty's pajamas were still there. And when we looked at the picture of her bottoms, there was evidence there that looked like it could be consistent with a sexual assault, which was a very important part of Patty's story that no one believed. There was what looked like blood stains and what looked like it could be a DNA stain. And we said, oh my goodness, here you have something you can take in, get it tested for DNA. Well, Brian was an excellent attorney, took it in and asked to be allowed to do DNA testing. And he was denied that opportunity to be able to test for DNA.
What was the reason? Why did they say that they wouldn't test it?
Well, this is really shocking. So this whole case, we've talked about this, it really stemmed around sexism, right? Sexism in the investigation, sexism in the prosecution, sexism in the way it was presented at trial. And something that was said in the trial stuck out to the judge who was ruling on the DNA. He said, I remember that this case, Patty said something about her sexual engine is hotter than most people or something to that effect. Mm-hmm. And the defense attorney said, oh, no. Patty didn't say that. That was the investigator who said that. That's the investigator who said she made all of these statements, but it was never recorded. And the judge said, well, regardless, whoever said it, that's something I heard in court and I remember it. That's what makes this case so unique. And that really tainted the judge in deciding whether he could even test this DNA or not. I mean, it would have been nothing for the court to just say, go ahead and test the DNA, right? And if there's a chance that you can prove that this person is innocent after all of these years, why not test it? But he denied that.
This is what was said. The lead investigator on the case asserted that she said that. The court, that may be, but I heard testimony that's been remembered because that makes this case unique. But they had no record of it.
Right, and the judge didn't realize there's a big difference between the detective saying she said that and Patty actually saying, yes, I said that. She never said she said. She always denied all of those statements that this detective said she made. When it was not recorded, it was a statement that was never recorded.
Patty, you've maintained you never said that, correct?
No, nobody ever said anything like that. No, I did not.
Yeah, particularly in that setting, I don't know why you would say something like that.
It makes no sense.
Yeah, of course not. All right, well, there's more to this. When we come back, Patty's attorney said the investigators did a swab of Patty's hands. She'll tell us what they found next, and then there's more. We'll be right back. $36 trillion. That is the U.S. debt, and it gets deeper and deeper by the day. Our debt has never been higher, nor have the stakes. The government is looking to slash the federal budget by $2 trillion, and no one knows what that will mean for your job, savings, and future. I've seen a lot in my time, and there's one thing I know for sure. You need to prepare before it's too late. I trust Preserve Gold to help protect my wealth, and I strongly urge you to do the same. They are the only precious metals firm I trust and recommend to my family, friends, and audience, and they have a special offer just for you. Text Dr. Phil to 50505 to get your free precious metals guide from Preserve Gold. With gold prices recently breaking records and analysts predicting this trend to continue throughout 2025, you cannot afford to wait. As a bonus, you can get up to $15,000 with a qualified purchase from Preserve Gold. So don't wait. Text Dr. Phil to 50505 today. Well, Patty Prewitt has been released from prison, and we are so excited about that. After nearly 4 decades behind bars, I personally think that's 4 decades too late. I don't think she should have ever gone to prison to begin with. She was convicted in 1986 for the murder of her husband, a crime she has consistently denied committing. Despite her release, Patty faces the constraints of lifetime parole, a condition that brings both relief and challenges for her. Lonnie Coombs is joining me, former LA prosecutor who has really taken a deep dive on this case. She and I have worked on it together and separately. And Lonnie, I think that this was a very prejudicial prosecution. I mean, the prosecutors are intended to seek justice, not convictions. Fair statement?
Absolutely. Absolutely.
And I think that this was a very tunnel vision prosecution. I think Patty seems to be the only one they ever looked at. And the prosecutor seemed to me to be very misogynistic and made comments to the jury that I thought were prejudicial against Patty, who had had affairs in her marriage earlier on. She and her husband had gotten past that, but I want to take a look at some of the things the prosecutor said to the jury. These are the prosecutor's argument for Patty's guilt, among other things. He said, the dignity of the institution of marriage requires a conviction. Now, what does that have to do with somebody being shot or not? The dignity of the institution of marriage requires a conviction.
A conviction for murder. For murder.
For murder.
Yeah.
I mean, how does the judge even allow that? He says she defiled his home with those lovers when children were there. She abandoned her duties as a mother of her children. He goes on. She was motivated by sheer greed and sexual lust and had been for years. She pursued one sleazy affair after another, 1, 2 at a time. And when you look at those things, not one of those statements had anything to do with she picked up a gun and shot this man.
That's right. That's right. They literally just painted her as this evil woman. And apparently that worked in Missouri in the 80s. You know, we talked to Patty's trial attorney and we said, what happened in the trial? And he said, Patty was convicted of adultery. That's what she was convicted of. He said in the 80s in Missouri, it was more like the 50s for women. And he said as soon as that jury heard about the affairs, which the prosecution put on ad nauseum, that was it. She was immoral, therefore she was guilty.
And they had what they considered physical evidence. They had a boot print. And the boot print by the pond, there was a pond where a gun was found.
Right.
And there was a boot print there. One boot print. Unless Patty is a pogo stick in disguise, how did one boot print get there unless it had been there a long time and the others washed away? How did they determine this is part of the fact pattern for the night of the murder?
Yeah, it didn't really make sense. So there's a pond on the Prewitt land, and that's where the murder weapon was found, which, by the way, Patty told the police that they had 2 guns and one was missing, and that ended up being the murder weapon. It was in the pond. They said there were boot prints around the edge of the pond, which matched some boots of Patty's. Well, that makes sense. She lives there. She's gone to the pond before. But there was one boot print that matched her boots that was near to where the gun had been lodged in the pond. The interesting thing, Dr. Phil, not only was it just one boot print, like you said, how there's only one boot print up there, but they dredged that pond to find the gun. It was so muddy, they They had to build a bridge to be able to walk out to that boot print. If it was that muddy, if she'd been in that with those boots would have been soaked and caked with mud inside and outside. They probably would have stuck in the pond. It doesn't even make sense.
Well, let's look at the boots. If we look at the shoestrings, there's no mud on the shoestrings. If we look on either one of them, there's no mud on the shoestrings. Then here's the top of the boots, the white packing, there's no mud on that. The toes of the boots, there's no mud above there's just on the bottom.
They're clean, yeah. Yeah.
How do you, it just doesn't make sense. It does not add up.
No, and they had a neighbor who came over to get some clothes and shoes for Patty and her kids, because of course they just ran off in the middle of the night. She said she saw those boots. They were wet, so she didn't bring them to Patty, but she said she never saw mud like that caked on. She thought that the prosecution, when they presented it to the jury, they'd actually added some mud to it, because she said, I saw them that night. They didn't have mud on them. They were wet, but not muddy.
And then she actually had some injuries, and they actually suggested they were self-inflicted. We'll talk about that after the break. Well, we're back with recently released Patty Prewitt, the longest-serving female prisoner in Missouri prison history. Her daughter Jane is here. Jane was 16 when Patty was incarcerated, and they've been really glad to see each other. Lonnie Coombs, anchor here for Merit TV News and former LA prosecutor, is joining me. Patty, when you hear us talk about this evidence, what's your reaction? What do you think about all of this when you hear us talk about it?
You are all perfectly right. And unfortunately, during the trial, I was too stupid to know what was going on. I didn't get it. But in retrospect, I see everything that was done incorrectly, unfairly, and sexist, completely sexist, the entire trial.
Well, I know it's got to be frustrating to you. And your story, of course, is that there was an intruder in the house. Jane, you say that your sister saw a flashlight under the door from the basement, and that your mother had injuries to herself that indicated that she had been assaulted. And there were injuries to your neck, Patty. Your recollection of this is that you were assaulted and a knife was held to your neck during that time. And this is why, Lonnie, DNA testing would be so important in all of this.
That's right. So important. Now, mind you, back then in the 80s, there wasn't a lot of DNA testing done. But since then, we've seen how much it's advanced, and it could clearly be helpful throughout the years and the decades as Patty's attorneys were fighting for this.
And they did a testing for gunshot residue, and the murder weapon was a shotgun. Mm-hmm. And we know that that kind of weapon has a lot of blowback. There's a lot of residue in the air that could be not just on the hands, but over the entire body in a closed space.
That's right.
And Patty was tested for that.
For her hands. I believe her hands were tested.
Right.
And they were clean. Yeah. No GSR.
Yeah. No gunshot residue whatsoever. So this has to be just infuriating when you think about it. Patty, how have you kept your spirit so positive when you look at these kind of injustices and knowing that you didn't get every possible consideration when they take your freedom away?
Dr. Phil, I have children. I could never give up. I could never give up because of my children. Isn't that why we do what we do? Because we are loved ones. So I could never give up hope. And I still to this day, expect to be exonerated somehow.
Jane, how proud of your mother are you that she's maintained herself and continues this fight?
Unbelievably proud. She has stayed so strong and helped so many others. She stayed strong for all of us kids, all of our children, her grandchildren have all raised going to visit her, seeing her being positive, seeing her being loving. It's pretty amazing. but she deserves to be completely exonerated.
Well, I certainly think that to take someone's freedom away in this country is a very high standard. And they deserve due process. They deserve to have a fair trial. And people could disagree about the story. They could disagree as to whether the facts are right or the facts are wrong, but no one could disagree that she has not had due process. Mm-hmm. I mean, she did not get a fair trial. Do you have any disagreement with that, Lonnie?
No, none whatsoever. Between the focus, the tunnel focus from the very beginning that it was her, to evidence that was not disclosed to the defense, all the way through, and then to the sexist slant of the prosecution and the trial. None of that was fair. None of that was due process for her.
No doubt about it. Coming up, many of Patty's former inmates say they thought Patty was their saving grace. We'll discuss that when we come back.
My name is Christine Peanut.
My name is Julie Montgomery.
My name is Emily Kirchhoff.
My name is Laura Phillips. I was formerly known as inmate 1213152.
And I did 12 and a half years with Patty Prewitt.
I had the privilege of being the neighbor of Patty Prewitt. She was an inspiration not only to myself, but to every other woman that came through those gates.
Patty was one of the women that took me under her wing and helped me and mentored me.
I couldn't imagine anyone more supportive, encouraging, and positive.
She helped me in ways too numerous to count.
She gives them encouragement and makes them feel good about doing something positive with their life, even if it's in prison.
And I am so grateful for having met her and continuing to be her friend.
She changed my entire life, and I was a repeat offender not looking to be anything but. If she could do that for me, imagine what she can do for the world.
Well, as you can see, Patty had become quite the mentor and advocate for her fellow inmates. And we have a surprise for Patty tonight, a person who says Patty changed her life when she was serving time, and now she wants to thank her. Jane is joining us virtually. Jane, welcome.
Hi, Patty. Thank you, Dr. Phil.
Well, Jane, thank you for being here. What did you want to say to Patty?
Patty, I just want to tell you how thrilled I am for you and for your family and for all of us. Just the world is a much better place with you in it. We need you here. We need you with us, fighting the good fight for those that are still the underdog. I always have believed in you, and I just wanted to thank you for everything you gave to me, every gift you gave me, but mostly the gift of reminding me of my worth and what it was that I could accomplish as long as I continued to believe in myself. And I'm sorry I'm crying. I had no idea I would. I'm just so happy right now, and I'm so happy for you, Patty.
I love you, Jane.
I love you too. I'll just never forget the gifts that you gave me. And I really look forward to the day when we can have some good old-fashioned belly laughs in person.
Real hugs.
Big time.
Jane, how long were the two of you together?
Well, it really wasn't that long of a time because they moved me like in the middle of my time on one camp. They put me in a different camp to complete a treatment program. But I was with Patty long enough to have some meaningful walks around the track of the prison when we discussed everything from families to music to poetry and everything in between. And I also was a participant in her personal training classes that she offered. And she was no slouch. I got my butt kicked by Miss Patty Prewitt, and I learned a lot about discipline and hard work.
Well, that is so great. Patty, when you hear all the things that these women have had to say and have this wonderful interaction with Jane, what does that mean to you?
I love these women. I love Jane. And Jane and I did tear up that track. And all people need for real, bartenders know it, people need to talk. People need to express themselves and know that someone's actually listening. It's real easy. It's real easy. I didn't do anything special.
Well, maybe it doesn't seem that way to you, but it sure seemed that way to Jane and a whole lot of others. I'll let you guys visit a little bit during the break. Coming up, what is next for Patty? We'll talk about that next. We're back with Patty Prewitt, who is out after 40 years that I don't think she should have spent a day of. But we're here with Patty and two Janes, Jane, her daughter, and Jane Ponte, who she has come to know and impact the life of while she was serving time incarcerated in Missouri. And I'm here with Merit TV anchor Lonnie Coombs. Lonnie, what's next for Patty? She is now gotten clemency and on parole. Can she get a pardon?
It's so subjective. It's really up to the governor to decide yes or no. And I don't know what this governor is going to think about that. He just granted clemency. I don't know if he's going to change that to a pardon or not. Usually once they grant clemency, that's pretty much what they do.
Well, we've got a new governor coming in. Patty, that's something you're still angling for, right? You hope to get that done?
Yes, it's going to happen.
Well, know that we're supporting you and we're behind you 100%, so we'll continue to stay in touch. We both work with the Innocence Project, and we're going to stay on this and stay behind you. But we're out of time for tonight, so I want to thank all of my guests, Patty and Jane Prewitt, and our News on Merritt Street anchor, Lonnie Coombs. For more information about tonight's episode, log on to drphil.com. Just know that we really value you being here with us, and we'll see you next time.